Welcome to This Explainer. So, you know that heavy, sinking feeling just humming in the background of your day? You might be sipping your morning coffee, the sun is shining, but underneath the whole shebang, there's this quiet hum of anxiety telling you, hey, everything's about to go wrong. Today, we're going to deconstruct a feeling that so many of us know intimately, yet fundamentally misunderstand. We're looking at the anatomy of doom, pulling apart the architecture of an internal cage that heavily influences how we operate. And ultimately, we're going to talk about how to reprogram your unconscious right out of it.
Let me ask you, is doom a future catastrophe, or is it something already in your head? We are incredibly conditioned by society and media to think of doom as this fiery apocalypse on the horizon. When we hear the word, we picture a meteor, an economic crash, the literal end of the world, right? We're constantly scrolling through relentless streams of bad news on our phones, which just reinforces this idea that the threat is always out there and coming for us. But what if it's actually an internal framework? What if it's a psychological structure you're living inside right now, without even realizing it? Our source material completely redefines this concept for us. It moves doom away from being an external physical threat or a specific future event, and defines it instead as a deeply ingrained psychological baseline. It's a lens through which your brain processes the entire world, not just a reaction to the evening news. Imagine putting on a pair of sunglasses, but the lenses are permanently tinted with impending disaster. Suddenly, every neutral event, every minor setback, even moments of genuine joy, they all get filtered through this expectation of ruin. It literally becomes the invisible operating system running in the background of your life.
To truly grasp how this works, and eventually learn how to reprogram it, we need to break down the anatomy of doom into its four structural components: the inevitability of collapse, inherited realities, a paralysis mechanism, and the illusion of safety. Let's explore exactly how these distinct layers stack up. We're going to start right at the foundation, which is layer 1, the inevitability of collapse. Now, this isn't just a passing bad mood or a pessimistic afternoon. Operating under this layer means your mind assumes safety is just a temporary illusion. You're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because of that, you inherently believe failure, destruction, or systemic ruin is the inescapable ultimate destination. And honestly, the heaviest part of this baseline is that this grim reality applies to absolutely any effort you make. Whether it's starting a new career, building a relationship, or just trying to improve your community, the underlying script whispers, hey, it's all going to collapse eventually anyway. But here is where things get really fascinating, leading us directly into layer 2, inherited realities. See, this feeling of inevitable collapse isn't actually something you organically created on your own. It is absolutely vital to understand the contrast between two very different psychological states here: acute fear and chronic doom. Acute fear, that's a healthy biological response. It reacts to an immediate, present threat, like dodging a speeding car or running from a predator. It pumps adrenaline into your system to keep you alive in the moment, and then it dissipates. Chronic doom, on the other hand, is a constant background atmosphere. It's not a reaction to the present moment, it is the very air you're breathing, lingering long after any actual threat has passed.
So, where does this heavy atmosphere come from? Well, you adopt it wholesale. As kids, we're basically sponges, right? We pick this worldview up from authority figures, surrounding cultures, and family lineages, because as children, we trust these sources to accurately explain how the world works. We absorb the anxieties of people and systems that treated catastrophe as an absolute, undeniable truth, rather than just a hypothesis about the future. You inherited their chronic doom. You absorbed their unprocessed fears and mistook them for objective reality.
And once this worldview is inherited, it doesn't just sit there passively. It morphs into layer 3, a paralysis mechanism.
If your subconscious assumes that doom is guaranteed, it goes to work actively suppressing your motivation, your willingness to take risks, and your long-range planning. Why? It all comes down to how the brain conserves resources. If it thinks the game is already lost, it views trying as a dangerous waste of energy. It actively sabotages your drive to match the expected reality, basically keeping you small and stationary because it calculates that effort in a doomed world is just pointless.
Why build a future if the architecture of the world is designed to collapse? That right there is literally the voice of the paralysis mechanism perfectly articulated. It's an incredibly persuasive, deeply limiting logic loop that convinces you to just throw in the towel before you even start. Which leads us to the fourth and perhaps most surprising architectural feature of all, layer 4, the illusion of safety through anticipation. In a twisted bit of irony, the mind actually embraces this doom as a bizarre coping mechanism.
It becomes this tragic psychological loop. First, your subconscious constantly expects the worst, attempting to brace for impact. Then, it falsely reasons that if you constantly predict the disaster, you can't be blindsided by it. Your mind genuinely thinks that by holding on to doom, by constantly rehearsing those worst-case scenarios, it's somehow keeping you safe from the pain of disappointment. But guys, it's a complete illusion. You aren't preventing the crash, you're just living the trauma of it every single day before it even happens.
So, when we zoom out and combine all these layers, the pervasive inevitability of collapse, the realities we inherited, the paralysis mechanism that stops us from acting, and that false illusion of safety, we are left with what the text calls the internal cage of anticipated ruin. But recognizing this cage is the absolutely crucial first step to escaping it. You can't reprogram a system if you don't know how it operates, right?
Living inside this cage has profound, tangible consequences. To successfully reprogram our unconscious out of this doom, we first have to recognize these consequences as the symptoms of a flawed operating system. We have to catch ourselves when our conscious mind is endlessly scanning for threats that just aren't there. We have to notice when we're paralyzed in compliance, disconnected from the possibility of genuine creation, and suffering a total loss of our autonomy. When you're stuck in this framework, you aren't truly living. You're just bracing for a crash, mistaking hypervigilance for actual safety.
Now that you can clearly see the architecture of this cage, the real reprogramming can begin. We have to ask ourselves a hard, provocative question. Will you remain trapped by a narrative you didn't even write? Or will you recognize this inherited expectation of ruin for what it is, a flawed, outdated program, and finally choose to step outside the cage? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this breakdown has empowered you to look at your own baseline in a brand new way.